Hi, I'm Ryan Hennesy, Communications Director here at SPUMC. We're on page 23 in the Wilderness Devotional Guide here, and it starts here with a poem. It's not a very long one, so I'll read it to you real quick. It's called Poem on Wilderness. The wilderness is a place of disruption. My grandfather was a good man, but he believed that wilderness emotions were not to be seen. Cry with the door closed. Don't dwell on the negative. Chin up, kid. We've been here before. My grandfather was a good man, but I'd like to say the wilderness is here to interrupt your previously scheduled programming. Like water in the desert and setting the slaves free, the wilderness might be the very thing we need, the very thing we dream, the very thing we plead for. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it never seems appealing to let a bird in the house, but if you do, then you might as well open every window and door. And if you do, then you might find yourself basking in the light, dancing in the breeze, overwhelmed with the beauty that an open door brings. So I'm opening my door and inviting in the wind to rustle up my heart and start over again. For sweeping the truth under the rug has never gotten us far. So, may the wilderness be like a bird in your house. Throw open your doors. The truth must come out. When I was reading this poem, it reminded me of the fact that in our house, we love birds. My 6-year-old daughter, Maddie, loves birds. I almost said she's obsessed. I don't think so. I don't think that it's quite that far, but every morning when we get up, we're having breakfast, we open the windows, the shades, and we look out and we see what the birds are doing on our feeders. We feed them, we replace the water, we watch them. We have a running tally of all of the species of birds we've seen at our feeders over the year. I think right now we're in the mid-30s. Everything from little tiny baby gray juncos to giant red-shouldered hawks. Everything in between. We love birds. And inevitably, after some time, a question continues to come up. And that is, Maddie will ask us, when can we get a bird as a pet? Now, having a pet bird is quite a bit different from taking care of birds that live outside. Feeding the birds and watering the birds when they live outside it's just a different kind of relationship that you have with a bird than when you have it as a pet. So our response is always to try to gently redirect. We're not really that interested in having a bird as a pet, because wouldn't it be a shame to take a bird, a creature who's meant to be soaring through the sky, and put it in a cage? Wouldn't it be a shame if the robins could never tilt their ear to the ground to hear the earthworms and then snatch one out and take it back home to its family? Wouldn't it be a shame if the tiny, downy woodpeckers could never find buried treasure in the bark of a tree? Or the much larger red-bellied woodpeckers never got a chance to spread their wings to frighten away some invading starlings? Wouldn't it be a shame if the blue jays never got to come swooping in with their screaming cries, Jay, Jay, Jay? None of those things would happen if they were caged up in our house. So we take care of them and we feed them and we let them live outside. And that's our response to Maddie when she asks. But this poem made me think about how the wildness of those birds, the wilderness of those birds, is an important factor in who they are and in who God made them to be. The tame, caged pet birds, the relationship that you have with that kind of a bird would be different. It would be, I know people who have owned birds and they find it to be a very special relationship. And that's a kind of relationship that has a lot of value to it. But it's a very different relationship than the kind of relationship that you get from birds who live in the wild, even if that wild is, suburban backyards. They have homes that they go to. They have their own families and their own flocks and their own ways of communicating. And even though we have familiarity with them, and they even have familiarity with us, there are times when one of us, Julia, most of the time, my wife, she'll go out and she'll feed the birds and she'll change the water. And some birds will hang by and they'll shriek at her and say, "Hey, move it. We need to get back in there. We're ready." And they'll talk to her and she'll talk back to them. And so we do have a familiarity, but it's a very different kind of relationship because they're still wild. And I think this poem is talking about that a little bit. It's talking about how the wildness of the birds and the wildness of our lives, the wilderness of Lent and the season as we look forward towards Good Friday and the whole Easter, the whole pageantry of Easter, the wilderness can be a place where we experience things differently than when we try to keep everything under control, when we try to keep things wrapped up in a little cage. The wilderness, the wildness of our lives, the wildness of our hearts and of our feelings can be places that are really important for us to explore. They can be places that it's really important for us to let them spread their wings a little bit, to let them let out their cries a little bit, to let our hearts and our feelings, Jay, from time to time. So, as you read this poem on page 23 in the guide, as you think about what it means to do something a little bit scary sometimes, to let go of control, to let your birds out of their cages and let them flap around your house, I don't know, maybe you take a moment and you think about how the wildness and the wilderness that we're experiencing in this Lenten season can be something that can show us a new thing about who we are, or can show us how to experience God in a new way. Because I know that experiencing a wild bird is way different from experiencing a pet bird. And that's just such a small example when it's compared to the way that we feel and the way that we experience life and the way that we experience God. Thanks for listening today, and God bless.